I have nothing.
Okay, it's 7:30. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is a special meeting called by the Board of Finance to meet with the Board of Ed on and discuss the budget that they submitted to us last Friday. We will be interacting and asking questions, and if there are questions that can't be answered, we can get follow-up information on those subsequently. We have another meeting scheduled for the same type of discussion February 28th. Whether we need that or not will depend on tonight, and also any follow-up questions that we submit, which I would guess would be by the end of this week. And then it'll depend obviously on who's around for the vacation when we get them answered, but that's the thing. Bruce likely has strep throat, so he won't be joining us this evening, and Lynn Vanderslice is in Utah, so she will not be joining us this evening. I would just like to begin by saying also a special meeting, there's no comments from the public at the end, just let me remind you of that. I'd like to begin by welcoming the administration and the school personnel. We thank you for being here at this hour of the evening after what is probably a long day for you all. I also want to indicate that we appreciate the work that went into this document. We know that you spend hours on it, and I just want to say that I was very impressed this year with where you came in. I think you took our guidance seriously. Obviously, you didn't quite get there, but that's okay. I think, though, a number that we're looking at here, so serious thought went into a request to balance the needs of the community with the needs of the schools, and I truly appreciate that, and I want to thank you for that. That said, Gil, I don't know if you'd like to make any comments on behalf of the board?
Just briefly to say, that we certainly thank the administration and the teachers for all the work that they've put in. It's not been a normal budget cycle for the Board of Ed. We did get an opportunity to meet the first time around the 13th of December, where we looked at the reports that had been delivered to us over the past several months for curriculum, enrollment, that sort of thing. Then we sort of went on a break until we got an arbitrated contract. We were able to come back then late in January, had a series of meetings. We had the superintendent presented his budget around January 26th, I believe. We then met again on the 30th, had our first opportunity to review the budget, went back in then on the 9th and approved the budget, which you have before you. I think we passed the budget unanimously. We're all very comfortable with it. I think all of us are certainly open-minded and wanting to do what we can, but most of all, I'd like to thank the administration and the principals for all the work that you've put in, because it is quite a lot of work was put into it, and it's a very good solution. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Perhaps we can start with, since you went into all the trouble to make this, Ken, explain what we're looking at here.
This is the graphics actually developed by myself, Mr. Canty, and Mr. Hepburn, with the help from Amy Korn, the technology instructor leader at the high school. And it basically lays out the entire budget on one page. In the middle is the pie chart that we normally have in our budget book that you'll see in the books you were sent. And if you move off, for example, to the left of that, the salaries area is exploded with a couple more pie charts, and then the actual numbers for each category of our employee. And the top is the employee benefits again, with the pie chart and with the raw numbers, and so on around buildings and operations, supplies, equipment, contracted services. And then at the very bottom, a form of the building blocks that shows the major contributors coming up to the 2.39% increase.
Okay, thank you.
And if it's on the website, and I assume that if any of you had seen it, you either would not have printed it off, or if you did print it off, it would be a little too small to read.
Well, thanks. That's.
And if I may, Warren, on the reverse side of this is an important document I think Tim had put together. In the center of the chart, it presents our theory of action for our strategic plan. which, as you can see, is a series of if statements. If we do such and such, then we will achieve the following. And Tim has taken 4 of the strands, the major strands of our strategic plan, the academic and social emotional needs for some students, technology, curriculum instruction, and community involvement. And it lists some of the work that it's representative samples of some of the work that's going on in each of these areas. And then the bottom is a dangerous area because it's, again, selective, and depending on your frame of reference, people feel, gee, my part didn't get reflected, but it shows some of the selected results that we have achieved with regards to from the Blue Ribbon School designation of Middlebrook to the performance on various measures of our students, the college acceptance rate, national merit data, the capped CMT scores. And then I think on the right-hand side, some of the other things that have been done that I think are very important in terms of our balanced instructional program and curriculum with regards to the arts and the numbers of ways that our arts people have tried to reach, as an example, have reached out to the community, and then some of the other athletic achievements. So it really kind of shows some of the results that we have achieved as a school district. So we wanted to just kind of point to that, as well as to how the numbers shake out on the chart on the front.
This is a great document.
Thank you. You know,
Really nicely done.
right. We really have gotten good feedback on it, and I think it does, other than having to wade through many pages, it does present in a very succinct way the key elements of our budget. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Gary, and thanks, Tim, for the work that went into it. Okay, really the purpose of our being here is to ask questions and hear answers and get feedback to anything that we have. I don't know who would like to start. Jim, Al, Gail?
I'll start.
Okay.
I'll echo Warren's comments on both the superintendent, the school, and the board's work on putting together what I think is a very reasonable budget. I don't know if it's my imagination or not, or I was just maybe paying a little more attention this year, but it seemed like there were more additions and subtractions, pluses and minuses that the board enacted on Gary's budget, recommended budget, and to me that certainly showed that the new board is fully engaged and involved, and I thought that was all great. The first question I've got is on enrollment projections. I want to make sure my understanding is correct. So on page 4 of kind of the first tab where it's got Alan Essman's projections, my understanding is that the year 2011 are the actual enrollment numbers. Correct. Right? So that, and our best guess for 2012, and I understand it's an estimate, and I know the standard disclaimer that I'm sure we'll follow at some point about it could be worse, but of course it could be better, that it does show that our best estimate is that enrollment will decline 37 kids next year. So I've got that right? Yes? Okay, thanks.
And there's, historically, as you may have seen, Jim, her track record has been very, as have her predecessors in doing that, but pretty good.
I understand. It's
some blips.
When you get into the actual budget, I know that the numbers are a budget year to a budget year, so it shows, when you look at those numbers, it actually shows overall the student enrollment, I think, is increasing. Yes. But in fact, it's again, our best estimate is it's actually decreasing. So I just wanted to make sure I was thinking about that correctly. I've got a few questions in the technology area. And if some of these were asked in some of the previous sessions that I wasn't able to catch up with, I did go on the website and look through the questions that were shown there. I apologize. My first question is around smart boards. If I added up correctly, the budget request about $130,000 for smart boards. So my first question is, how many smart boards do we currently have? How many would this plan add? And how many would be left to add to reach the, let's call it the optimum or the end game for smart boards?
Okay. What we have right now is 155. This plan would add 11. Actually, I'll have to get back to you on the
That's fine.
on the numbers, but what it would get us to is it would complete Cider Mill and Miller Driscoll, and it would get another 2 per team at Middlebrook, and it would complete a couple of subject areas at the high school.
Right.
I can get you I'll be happy to get you the.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, my recollection was that a smart board with software, I thought was around a couple $1,000s, so that, you
Well,
know,
it's not just it says smartboard, but it's also a mounted projector and the wiring,
Right.
cabling, and the plates
I
that
know
go
there's
on the
some
wall.
ancillary
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah,
so-
okay, good. And then the end game number, do you, and I don't know
Oh,
the exact number.
The end game would be another 79 total from where we are right now.
Okay, great, thanks. My second question is around the document cameras, and it's really the same question. If I added up correctly, you're requesting about $24,000 for document cameras. In reading through the technology plan, my sense was we don't have very many of those now. Maybe even only a handful, but maybe I'm wrong. So, you know, how many do we currently have now? How many would we be adding, and what would the end game there be? Although that might be a little more nebulous right now.
Okay, and I can certainly get you all of that information. I'll have to track down exactly how many we have now, because we have a number that were purchased as gifts from PTA donations or through the Perkins grant,
Okay.
things like that. So
That's
I can
fine.
get you
Okay.
all those numbers.
Good. Third question, you're requesting, I think, about $106,000 for wireless capability in all the schools. The bigger number is certainly the high school. If implemented, what are the tangible benefits that would be realized? And in particular, you know, what cost savings do you foresee being generated in any or all of the schools with wireless capability?
Okay. We've already seen the benefits now at the high school. Students are able to bring their own devices in the classroom. They can take notes, type essays, do research right on the spot. It's kind of anytime learning. It also frees up teachers. You know, they can actually grab the wireless. If they have like an iPhone, they can log on to the wireless, and they can check. We use our website Edline a lot more now. Teachers post their homework on it. So it allows students a little bit more access, or actually anytime access to this information. In terms of savings, I don't know how I'd be able to give you an honest answer to that, but I think as we move forward, the future, 5 years, 10 years down the line, we're going to start to get to areas where textbooks are going to be more online, and we won't be purchasing physical textbooks. We're going to be not needing to invest as much as in storage as people move to things like Google Docs and use the online storage that Google gives you for free. So I couldn't give you an honest, tangible answer, but there will be cost savings. And I think there'll be a certain level of efficiency too, as data teams can meet anywhere, because if they have the laptop, they can meet in whatever room they need to be and have access to the information. And it's just the right tool for teachers as a teaching tool for the way education is headed. You know, we're entering an age where it's really about information, and they'll give high school students that access to information like they get in colleges and most of our comparison schools, all of our comparison schools right now.
All right. And then the last question under technology is project number 38, the Social Studies Portable iPad Lab.
Yes.
Could you explain that to me?
Absolutely. Actually, this is the head of was instructional leader for social studies for the high school, has been very excited about this. It's been cut a number of years, so she has a program already in place. Now, she actually they have a limited area of wireless there, so depending on what room she's teaching in, she can actually use it with her own iPad, which she can pass around with students, and some students will bring in their own iPads, but she really wants to have the experience where everyone can have it. But essentially, she's developed projects and curriculum to go with her, several of the classes she teaches and some of the other social studies teachers have. The reason you want to have an iPad cart is you need to be able to sync all the devices so they all have the same apps, and you cannot get out of your license agreement, so you need to make sure that you're legally purchasing and downloading the correct amount of apps. Also, it gives you security. You lock them away. You know, the device that could be easily stolen, you can lock them away. Push that cart into a room that you can lock also. So that's the reason for the cart.
So every student that went to class would
You
snag an iPod, yes?
iPad for
Or
class.
iPad,
You-
iPad.
They already have the iPod. That's not a problem.
Out of my league already.
They would use it for the class period. And
Right.
again, as we talked about with the wireless, it's one of those things that goes along with the wireless.
But then the teacher would have the day's program or the class program on his or her iPad that then would sync with the other. I'm trying to visualize, okay, everybody's got an iPad in their hand, now what?
Well, they can go on the internet, do research, they can write, copy and paste from the websites onto wherever they're taking their notes. They can create projects right on the iPad. There are apps out there for research tools. They can access the high school database for information.
So I could see that when they'd be working on their own.
Correct. And then if the high school has Google Docs for EDU, so if they're doing their project in Google Docs, they can go home and continue working at home on that same project.
Okay.
It just sort of brings the library and the world into that classroom instantly for everybody.
Okay. And then my last question actually is, I think across all the schools, there were significant increases requested in salaries, additional time for summer curriculum days. I think it was 120 days for the Cider Mill, Miller, Driscoll, Middlebrook, and 152 for the high school. Are those increases making up, and I'm not sure who I'm looking at, are those increases kind of making up for what's been lost maybe over the last couple of years? Are those number of curriculum days the old norms that used to be, let's say, 5 years ago, or somewhere in between?
Actually, those are restorative recommendations. They do bring the requests at the building level and the building levels and at the district level back to the allocations that we had before the world changed. They're also, though, responsive to the needs of the district, more importantly, in that we're very much involved in the opportunity to map our curriculum so that the days that are allocated, teachers will work as teams to map the curriculum across all content areas. And we're also in need of being responsive to the recently adopted Common Core state standards in language arts and mathematics, which is an opportunity for us to try to get up to speed, because we do face a significant change in the assessments that will be administered by the state of Connecticut in the year 2014-2015. So we've given what we feel is an adequate recommendation in terms of summer curriculum. We're going to have a short summer because of the weather scenarios, and this hopefully will give us an opportunity to at least get on the correct pathway to get us in a place where we need to be here in a few years.
Okay. So my presumption would be those would also be, as you look 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line, kind of the new norms as well.
Right. They again really do return us to what
Right.
used to be our typical allocation.
Okay.
It is important, in light of your question, to recognize that this is an area that did take substantial reduction during these last 3 budget cycles because of our emphasis on trying to maintain class size.
I am aware. That's it for me.
I'd like to follow up on a couple of, well, one of Jim's questions in particular, but it had 2 aspects to it, the smart boards and the document cameras. Is training in the budget for the teachers that are going to get these that haven't had them before?
What we've done with training this year, we got a grant from the Wilton Education Foundation, and we trained 22 expert teachers. So at the lower grades, it's 2 per grade level, and then it's kind of content area as you get into the middle high school. And the expectation is that those teachers will be our lead trainers for anyone receiving new equipment. But that seems to be a better model, the sharing resources among teachers who you know and know the curriculum you're teaching. So there's no training in the budget for the smart board projects that we're purchasing now because we'll have it in place.
Okay.
Can I just follow up on that as well, if I might? So with respect to the smart boards, when a few years ago when we started diving into that a little bit, there was some question as to what the lifespan of those smart boards were. Now that we have some, certainly we've deployed more, and other school systems are now using that. Do we have more daylight into the MTBF of those?
The school system that's had them the longest is Westport. I know that they've had them since like the early 2000s. Now I don't know if it's the same model, but it was a smart brand, and they're still able to use their smart boards. Again, take this with a grain of salt. Some of the vendors I've spoken with have customers who've had them longer, 11, 12 years, still going strong. They replace the pen tray once in a while, or they replace the pens. Well, they actually aren't really pens. They're, it looks like a pen, but you use it to write. They'll actually wear out from overuse before the smart board itself wears out. So I'm sorry I don't have much of an answer. Smartboard doesn't ever give you an answer on that. I have tried.
Well, they want to be held to it, and it's not so smart, exactly. One other follow-up on to Jim's, relative to the wireless infrastructure.
Yes.
So there's 2 components to that. There's the actual wiring of it, and then there's the equipment that goes behind it.
That is correct.
The wiring has a lifespan of 15, 20, 30, 40 years, quite frankly, whereas the equipment will probably die within 5 to 8 years. They need replacement. Can we get a breakout of that so we know what is a potential bonding item versus having to OpEx that?
Okay. I can find out that information for you, sure.
Okay, thank you. Who wants to go next?
Andy would like for me to go next.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you,
you, Andy. No, wait a minute. Well, I will also echo all the previous comments. Thank you for all of you for your work on this very clear budget. And I'd like to, especially to highlight the efforts on negotiating new transportation arrangements and fuel really stand out. I mean, they just pop out of all parts of the budget, and I was very impressed by that. Just a few things, and really it's only for clarification. In the, I believe it's the initial section, page 32, there's a security item, some security measures were, actually, maybe I read this improperly. I thought I had read that some security measures were deferred.
Middle grade,
Yes,
the high school.
in the high school. And I just wondered which ones those were.
Which ones were,
Were deferred.
those were additional cameras. We're doing the security cameras at the high school in 2 phases.
Okay. I had another question generally about the technology investments, which are extensive, and I think it's sort of been something that everybody's been waiting to do and to make, and finally it was possible. And my interpretation of all this was that it was possible to do that because of some of the relief that came this year with the arbitration. And one thing I was curious about, there's a lot of computers, there's a lot of hardware, individual stations and iPads and things like that. And when I used to run a firm, I would take a contract on hardware and it would go 3 years, 4 years, and then I'd have to replace everything. And of course, it was one big balloon. And there's advantages and disadvantages to however you decide to slice this. But did you give some thought, and I'm sure you did, to buying so many at once so that they will all come to the end of their life at once? Or is there some advantage to staggering so that you have half of them that wear out after 3 years and then the following year you get more? And you know what I'm saying?
There are some, there are advantages to both approaches. Part of the reason is, as my predecessor was building up our computer and the infrastructure from zero, from the early 1990s, they were trying to reach a level where we were competitive with our comparison districts. And they were also trying to get reliable equipment, so they weren't holding on to computers for 7 years that were either really slow or falling apart. And also so you wouldn't have a haphazard lab. And as Tim mentioned earlier, it's going to be incumbent upon us to make sure we have labs with extremely reliable equipment, because the statewide testing in 2014 is supposed to be online. And as a matter of fairness to every student, we need to make sure that they have a reliable computer. The other reason is if you have a bad budget year, which we have
Could happen.
Could happen. Never heard of it. The danger is then that people decide we just don't buy them, and then you're holding on to these machines. If you do them all at once, you hold on to them beyond their warranty. So the cycle structure we've done is we've been able to buy an extended warranty and hold most of the equipment for 4 years. And then when it's out of the extended warranty is when we cycle the lease again. So we pay the lease over 3 years, and we keep the equipment for 4 years. And the company we lease them from gives us that extra year of warranty, which has worked out because the last 3 years, the machines that keep falling apart that we're having to order parts on, or motherboards are failing, or happen to be the 4-year-old computers. So it's worked out well for us that way.
Okay. Thank you. And I have some small things. On page 1 of the high school budget, I noticed the parking fees went down. I was just curious why. I think it's $9,500.
No, it's going up, that's an increase in revenue.
Oh, in revenue, okay, thank you.
I was going to say, it's
Yeah.
$150 now, that's up.
Well, the fee itself, yeah, it was the total receipt, but that's right, that's revenue. And then I had a question. There's a reference in the footnote to a small amount, but magnet school tuition. Where do we pay magnet school tuition to?
We have some students at the CES Arts Academy. It's a program where they take their academic work here, and then in the afternoon they go up to CES for the arts component. I don't think there are any other magnets that we're involved in. That's the major one. We try to do ride sharing with other districts so that we can keep costs down on the transportation and that. So it's been a good experience for those students who've availed themselves of it.
Just a follow-up to that, I noticed that in past years we've budgeted for incoming tuition, or we've had actuals of incoming tuition. This year it seems like we didn't budget anything for incoming.
Right. We haven't taken tuition-based or tuition students because we didn't want to impact class sizes because we were ranging at the upper end.
So the plan for next year is not to have any
That's
tuition.
Right, the only ones we have in the district right now are seniors this year when we graduated.
Okay. And then in special services, I just wondered if I was reading this right. It seems that there are, it looks like there's been kind of a shift from more outplacements to more students who are getting in-home tutoring and things like that. Am I reading that properly?
Excuse me, our outplacement number is up slightly. It's really a reflection of the students' needs. There is a shift in more public tuitions as opposed to the private tuitions. So the number of students might be up slightly, but the configuration of private to public is more in favor of public at this point.
We also had a decrease in the number of the costs and outplacements because we had students who had aged out. We have students in those situations often are with us till their 21st birthday, so they've aged out. So that was a decrease of $422,000.
Yeah, I think there was a specific reference to that someplace as well. And finally, I just wanted to ask if you wanted to address generally obviously this was an opportunity to make some technological investments that hadn't been really possible before. Were there any other sort of opportunities to invest for the long term that you wanted to highlight, just to
I think two areas, and maybe Tim and Bob might, or one of the principals might want to add to this. I think one is we were able this year to, and we've had a moratorium on any new courses for the future, and I think we've had some that have been on the runway for some time. One was a course that we received some feedback from some of our alums about the need to add additional computer science coursework to our curriculum. And one course that has been developed is the web design course. The nice thing about this is that we also supplemented some of the cost of the development cost with a Perkins grant money. And we think it's going to be an exciting course. They're in the process of registering, so I don't have a handle on exactly how many students have signed up for it, but we think it's going to be a very course. It'll receive a lot of attention and get a lot of enrollment. The second course that's been in development, and the board heard and acted on the new course was AP Economics. And we've had an economics course. This is a course that really we think there's going to be huge interest in our students. So many of them, as you know, go on to be econ majors, and it really would give them a leg up, I think, going in with a more intensive background in both micro and macroeconomics as they go on into college. Again, both of these courses are going to be offered without any additional headcount. So we're working them into our program. Other investments, Tim?
Well, I have a few that I could add to the list. The first is our emphasis in the area of literacy and reading instruction. So the budget proposal does include hopefully some focus in terms of increased staffing for reading support at the high school. The extent to which I want to be careful about the ed speak, but our mandate to provide scientifically research-based interventions, SRBI, practices to intervene with those students who may be demonstrating challenges in their learning in the general classrooms. So there's an investment in a data warehousing tool called RTI Studio that has gone from a grant piloted phase now to being funded through our operating budget. So the work of what we call our data teams to support instruction and student needs is well represented in the budget. There's an opportunity to catch up on some of, again, the deferred expenditures in the area of instructional materials, textbooks being one example. We talked about the opportunity to catch up in summer curriculum development. They also were able to recover some funding in the area of professional development and training as something that's obviously important to make sure our faculty are well prepared to face the challenges of teaching in today's classroom. So we're actually quite excited that the current budget proposal does in fact give us a great opportunity to impact teaching and learning in the district beyond what are already extraordinary levels that we find now.
Thank you. I just do one follow-up to myself. If that's possible. And just to continue in that line of questioning, you mentioned for example, that textbooks would be transitioning to more online and so on. Are any of these opportunities, do you think, ways to lead to savings in the future? For example, will online texts end up being more economical? I know the rights are always very expensive, so I understand that. But are some of these things ways to invest that will get us savings in the future?
Well, again, I don't know if Matt can add to this, but it's a very challenging question. And to give an honest answer on the out years as it relates to gaining efficiencies, the reasonable mind, the mind of wisdom, would suggest we will gain some efficiencies. It just seems as though it would be quite natural to do so. But I anticipate that won't happen from the textbook manufacturers. They're going to go digital. You may save on your front end costs, but you're going to have annual costs to maintain up-to-date online resources. I think that you would anticipate that the life of the mobile devices will mirror what we found with calculators. That over time there'll be an expectation that the purchase of a mobile device would be the responsibility of a family as prices come down, and that has to mean an advantage on the operating side for the school district. But my guess is, even having said that there'll be another emerging technology that will be quite at our beck and call that will require funding. So who knows?
Yeah, we might have Smart Board 4.0 or something like that.
Matt, I don't know if you can add to that.
The only thing and again, it's not a huge savings, but what we found at the high school is the teachers who started to embrace Google Docs are not using paper as much. That a lot of the assignments now, they're using the website to create assignments. If we get to a place where we're having blended learning courses where some of the content is done on the web, you're not generating paper, some of the discussion. Again, as Tim said, difficult to play that out, but I do think it will make us more efficient. Just that access to information is such a critical piece of the way kids learn today. And it's the way you're well aware of the way the universities are. It's where they're headed.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Any follow-ups to Gail's questions?
Gail, do you want to follow up to Gail?
I did.
Sure. I was very happy looking through the budget to see some of the restored items. The training, some of the. I know we've been holding off on some classes. I was happy to see them in here. And in that respect, I think everybody was conservative. I don't think they opened the floodgates entirely, but got the high priority items out there. I wasn't as thrilled with the fact that the two really largest bumps came from technology purchases and the athletic department, and I would have liked to see a little more instructional spending. And I'm not. There's an increase request of $140,000 for tech-related contractual services, and my concern is that those never seem to go down. There's a lot of technologies that we're replacing that are still lying around the school, bits and pieces and boxes, and contracts that aren't over yet. And I have a lot of concern about the size of the leap forward that we're taking this year. So that's a broad-based question. I'm not going to ask tiny technology questions because I know you guys have been through all this. It's just a high-level comment. It's a concern. I'm a little bummed out that you've removed the gifted program from the enrichment program from Lower Driscoll for roughly the same price as an iPad cart. That's my own.
Can I just
personal
add
contribution.
just a little point of clarification? a lot of that contracted services are for installation, so those are
Right.
one-time fees. That's not a fee that we will be continuing. It's for installing the wiring for the wireless, or setting up the wireless, or installing and wiring.
But these all have follow-up training and contractual, I mean, none of these have set up
Yeah,
warranty
I don't
costs that
think, but I
go
don't
away
think
after
it
year one.
will, that 140 will be stuck in there in perpetuity. I think a lot of that is a one-time installation fee.
Do you know offhand the amount for last year, for example, that we paid in ongoing warranty or contract or training?
I don't know offhand, because I have this year's budget books in front of
Okay,
me,
all
but,
I'd
we
be curious
certainly
what
find that.
last year's
Sure.
ongoing, not installation, but ongoing soft costs of technology are.
It's important to note that, if I may,
Sure.
that a significant increase in that contracted services in the technology area, again, is the extent to which we need to fund that data warehousing feature. Over 50% of that increase is the result of funding that particular, the RTI Studio product,
Yeah, it is, okay.
which was funded the last 2 years through a grant.
Mhm.
So that's a big piece of that pie.
It's the evergreen costs that I'm concerned about.
I'm sorry?
I said it's sort of the evergreen costs that concern me,
Mhm.
especially when the technology's leapfrog and we're still paying, ongoing service and training for a technology that we're not using anymore.
But well,
I don't
I
know if
don't
I'm
know that I would
getting
make that
it.
assumption.
I don't know if I can assume that that's in evidence that we're paying for things we're not using.
The contracted services that we have are for maintenance on Power School, which is an information system, ongoing maintenance and backup for our servers or critical things that we need to maintain uptime. We have backup for our HR system, the kind of critical needs system. We don't pay contracted services for any programs or equipment that we're not using.
If you give me a second, I can dig up the sort of
No,
the
no,
5-year
yeah.
trend in
Okay.
contracted services.
Well,
which is-
yeah, you may see the 5-year trend go up, but what's happening is we're getting more and more programs that we maintain that are electronic, like Naviance is another example, which is was kind of imposed on us. It's one of these state mandates that we have to have in place by July 1st. Well, when you buy the program, you have to also buy the maintenance for the program too.
Yeah.
Well, maintenance is per student.
but if I could just follow up on Andy's question or point about technology, if you will, versus classroom type stuff like the gifted program. Maybe somebody could just give us the big picture. I don't know if it's Gary or Tim. Why do you pick tech at this point over replacing the gifted program?
And actually, to expand on that, your longer answer, I don't want to say is there a plan, because I'm sure there is a plan, but I'd love to know, rather than simply seeing what's in the market right now that seems to make a difference in Westport, or what's the long-term thinking of the role of tech? Are we simply going to buy anything that seems to advance learning above where we are right now, or is there a thought-out 10-year process to using technology to our advantage?
Well, I'll take the overall question on prioritization first. I hope the board can appreciate the level of discourse that goes into decision-making around the recommendations we make within our budget. Certainly, we've been very clear that our first priority is class size, and to make sure that we're taking all available resources to maintain the class size practices that this community expects. Having said that, I'm sure the board recognizes that we've crept from the low end of board practice to the high end of board practice in response to the budget constraints of the last 3 years.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but just to use this, it's incredibly clear to us, because you've been very consistent about class size, and because you've emphasized what the relevance of class size is.
Right.
It's been clear every year as a through line where we are in relation to that, where we're going, how money is spent, keeping that as a focus. So that's a good point. What's the flip side of that on the technology end? I don't have that clarity.
Well, I'd like to just complete the thought pattern here. I think there's a story of the last 3 years that needs to be told, that we had to make substantial reductions in what you might describe as our controllable cost centers, i.e. gifted programs, grade 3 world language. We had to make significant reductions away from the classroom to support class size. So the logic of, this is probably the first year where we've had to debate at length as we've looked at restorative recommendations about what our priorities are. So having said that, we actually have made requests that are quite minimalistic and respond to curriculum development, the list that I went through before. And at some point, you do have the conversation about the gifted program, Miller Driscoll. You do have the conversation, and we had it at length about world language. And you end up prioritizing those programs and that are number one on the runway in terms of meeting the greatest needs that we have at this moment in time. The other piece of that is to recognize that a very thoughtful deliberation goes in as to whether or not the programs that were reduced over time, if we're able to provide a quality experience to replace those programs in the interim. So there is a comfort level in terms of the differentiated instructional practices that we see at the K-5 level in responding to those high ability learners that are in our classrooms. We work very hard on that. The extent to which we're responding to the loss of the mentor program at the high school. And Bob and his team are leading a very thoughtful process this year to look at a cost-effective way to move forward in recommending some type of program in the coming year that can be responsive to the loss of that program. So, there's a reality here about what we faced in the last 3 years. And now we are hopefully at a point where slowly but surely we can find some restorative recommendations that can be, to a large extent, prioritized as our greatest need. Now, in terms of technology, I'll go first. I think it's just so important to recognize that this is the fabric of teaching and learning as we move forward. It's just an integral part of what the modern day classroom is going to look like. I don't use the term 21st century. I don't know what that means. The modern day cutting edge classroom. It's about access. It's about mobile. It's about wireless. It's about web-based. It's about moving information. And the context of this is around providing students with an opportunity to develop their thinking. Technology is a teaching tool that will provide us with an opportunity for students to develop those skills that will outlive the technology. The ability to think critically, the ability to create, the ability to innovate. And that's what makes our country so great, because we focus on that. So I would appreciate the extent to which the argument is made